Welcome to Rappahannock Issues. I'm Tom Cohen.
And I'm David Kerr.
And we're going to be looking at topics that are of interest to our community, both regionally and to the state.
Hello, I'm David Kerr, and welcome to Rappahannock Issues. Today we have a very exciting topic to talk about, and also a very innovative and creative initiative. It's aimed at helping wounded warriors, that's injured or ill veterans, and the program is specific, what we're going to be talking about, is specifically aimed at finding them ways to get back into the civilian workforce, to give them new skills, and to do this in a very innovative and creative way. Today, we're joined by Mr. Jim Wiggins, who is the president of the Federal Information Technology Security Institute. Yep. And also we're joined by Wendy Maurer, who is the president of the LRH Group. She is a local Stafford businesswoman and very active in what's called, and this is a new acronym for everybody, or a new word for everybody, the Wounded Warrior Cyber Combat Academy. And these guys are all associated with the military in some respect, or have military backgrounds, and they've tried very hard to make it into an acronym. Now, I think just about everybody who's ever been in the military knows that there's an acronym for everything. And so far, and they've got to work on this, it's called the WW2CCA. Now, you guys got to come up with something that can turn into a word that can be said, but I like that. WW squared CCA. But the whole thing is aimed at helping returning veterans who are wounded or ill find a new career, find a new vocation, and get back into the workforce. It's one of the biggest challenges there are. What I'd like to ask you, either one of you, feel free just to chime right in. What's the mission of the Academy? I summarized some of what it does, but what's your overall mission? How do you see yourself?
It's a great question, David. So the mission of the Academy is really to take the League of what we call the Wounded Warriors. It's kind of a construct that we've established as part of the program to really represent this population of injured and men and women on the battlefield, and really retrain them and reprovision them into the cyber workforce. We see a lot of benefits in terms of parallels between their military career, which I'm sure we'll get into, and the kinds of knowledge, skills, and abilities you need within the cyber dimension. So long and short of it is the mission is really to retrain the League of the Wounded Warriors to help protect and defend the nation's information systems.
And I think that kind of leads to an interesting point here. I've read a bit about your organization for the show. You're aiming at a whole problem set that's massive. Everybody heard about the OPM break-in.
Right.
17 million people had their career information and security clearance and all that stuff stolen. So obviously there are a lot of bad guys out there trying to break into our networks and our control systems. You're training folks specifically to deal with that threat, aren't you?
Right. But really beyond just the government. I mean, if you think about it for a moment, technology has infused itself into society on every level. And so the OPM data breach that we saw was really one example of many that could occur not only in the government, but in the private sector, in the nonprofit industry, in the medical sectors. Every industry of our society is impacted in much the same way. We've become dependent on technology. And while we've enabled it through the internet and the use of technology, a lot of really interesting capabilities, the one challenge that we have today is how do we protect and defend all of these assets that are out there.
Well, and this isn't really the topic of the show to talk about IT or security specifically, but do you consider the United States particularly vulnerable and this need particularly critical?
Absolutely. I mean, the thing I like to get people to think about now is our national economy, for all intents and purposes, is up on the internet. in terms of all of the intellectual property and the identities and all of the trade secrets that are out there. Companies today, really their differentiator in many cases isn't so much ultimately maybe what they produce, but it may be how they produce it or the schematic diagrams that are associated with it. So whether you're at Silicon Valley or you're a company that trades on the New York Stock Exchange, you've got information that you want to protect. And the very fabric, if you will, of society in many ways is now up on that national stage. And the challenge we have is how do we protect it?
Well, no, there's always enterprises like this always have a very interesting start, especially when you're dealing with a lot of private sector people in various circumstances. I read someplace that this all started at a cocktail party.
It did, yeah. Well, I don't say it's a cocktail party.
All right,
let's be a little bit politically correct, right? So.
Now, I never heard of a contractor going to a conference and having a cocktail party, let alone a government person. So, okay, let's pretend that didn't happen.
So the impetus.
You were having coffee.
Yeah, well, it actually occurred over several years. So my background is really cyber education, IT education. And in 2009, a good friend of mine who recently passed away, his name's David Kais, he had taken a liking to me, come to some of my classes, and was really interested in the whole, hey, can you do more with this training that you're doing? Could you do some good? And he pitched the idea to me to go after the wounded warrior population, and I frankly had no background in it. I don't have a military background. I know how to educate. I know how to train people. About a year and a half later, a good friend of mine by the name of Sam Maroon comes in and pitches the same idea to me. And then another year or so later, the third gentleman by the name of Manny Galvin is at a conference, like you mentioned, walks up to me after hearing me present on how to build cyber talent. And guess what he asked? The exact same question. So there's this kind of underlying theme that starts to develop. I start to recognize. So I bring all these guys together. We sit down. We start to formulate a strategy. And 3.5 years later, here's where we're at. Well,
you're going out, it has a very personal quality to it. Naturally, with your discussion there, we're talking about a program, an initiative, and it's getting people organized, the money where it needs to be. But these are going to real people with real issues. And I gather you work with the major military hospitals. Tell me a little about that.
We do, yeah. So we're actually working closely with Walter Reed. And this is where Wendy kind of comes into it, in that we started to engage some of the organizations that are out there, like the FCA chapters. That's the Armed Forces Communication Electronics Association. And Wendy happened to be on the board of the local Quantico chapter. And she was there when we pitched the idea, looking for help from them. And that really brought her into the fold. And then she came up to Walter Reed with us, and just really ended up, got an opportunity to kind of look at the program externally and ask a lot of the tough questions, and I guess we passed the test. You know, we were able to answer the tough questions about how does the money get spent and where does it go, and other things that you're concerned about with if you're thinking about donating. And so that brought her into the fray, and she's been a tremendous supporter ever since.
Not every organization is as, I guess, above board as the W2CCA. And so before I got involved, I fell in love with the mission. The Armed Forces Communications Electronics Association is, it's the industry association that facilitates collaboration between government and industry in everything IT. And so to help the wounded warriors, this was an excellent opportunity for us to invest in a program that is completely and totally within our mission set. And we provide hundreds of thousands of dollars in scholarships for STEM education. So this was a population that wasn't being served, and we found that it was excellent for FCA to support.
I want to talk a little more about that and about your contact with President Walter Reed, and about the individual soldiers and sailors and Marines that you actually helped. So we'll be taking a short break. We'll be right back. Stay tuned.